With us, the EU-Mercosur treaty signing has been postponed until January. This comes from sources close to EU leadership and leaked by diplomats. We're, of course, expecting a full confirmation in the moments to come. And it seems that it was a phone call between Brazil's Lula da Silva and Italy's Giorgia Meloni that did the trick. Meloni telling da Silva she needed a month to persuade sceptical Italian farmers. And there's still the question, of course, of French farmers who are against it. They say the whole thing could undercut their prices and effectively trash their markets. Emmanuel Macron, the French president, was the other EU holdout fighting the corner of his farmers, even as they were pointing the finger of blame at him. Let's bring in Armen Georgian, our Europe editor, who joins us now live from Brussels. There at the EU summit for us. What does this decision mean, Armen? Tell us about that. And does it make a signing of a deal in January any more likely in reality?
Well, that's a huge question. I mean, we've already seen this week, Mark, attempts to make the Mercosur proposed trade deal more palatable to the more skeptical EU member states and indeed, of course, to the farming community. But those moves don't seem to have really moved the skeptics at all. I mean, today, once again, President Macron said that this deal doesn't meet expectations as it stands, and this is despite the safeguards being tightened in a European Parliament vote. We've had, of course, these big protests in Brussels today with a combination of complaints and discontents voiced by the farming community, not only about Mercosur, but it's a very difficult moment for EU leaders to get farmers completely offside by sort of steaming ahead and signing this deal. So politically, in the last couple of days, it did look increasingly unlikely that this deal would be signed. And now, basically, what EU leaders seem to be doing is to try and sort of keep it alive for another few weeks so that President Lula da Silva of Brazil doesn't just pull the plug on the whole thing, because, of course, previously he'd been saying it's now or never. Maybe he was being figurative and he can be perhaps channeled into waiting for a bit longer. But it's hard for me to see what different things could be done to make this deal actually acceptable to France and maybe one or two other countries that have been holding out. Because, as I said, there have already been attempts this week to tighten the deal to make it really more acceptable, and that doesn't seem to have worked. So I'm not sure what else EU leaders can pull out of the bag over the next month.
Indeed, the whole concept of free trade, of course, is at stake here. This has taken some 25 years in the negotiation, hasn't it? Which makes it all the more remarkable that we're at this stage and we can't sort of agree on a win-win scenario between both blocs. It's Emmanuel Macron, Giorgia Meloni, France, Italy. Their farmers are the ones who are objecting most of all. Can you shed any light on what the implications are there? Why are the farmers so angry about this EU-Mercosur deal?
Well, you know, what they've been saying is it's a fundamentally bad deal because it doesn't take into account the fundamental difference in standards, so that the basically Latin American products are not held to the same standards as European products. There's completely different standards in Europe on pesticides, on hormones, things like that. And basically what the farmers have been saying is that you cannot address those things with purely defensive mechanisms, with these safeguard mechanisms, because those really have to do with disturbances in the market. They don't go to the fundamental issue. So you've really got this big difference between how farmers are actually feeling about Mercosur, what a threat they believe it represents to their livelihoods, and the kind of political talk that you hear in settings like this, Mark, in the EU Council building, where you have political leaders who say this is a geopolitical make or break moment. Europe has been talking about, striking out in a more kind of autonomous direction to make itself less dependent on US President Donald Trump and his administration, that it wants to even make up for some of the impact of US tariffs on Europe by creating a free trade area, perhaps to alleviate the pressure that the US is putting on the EU when it comes to things like cars. And it is true that I think there's a general consensus that the car industry would actually quite benefit from Mercosur. Even detractors of Mercosur that I spoke to earlier this week would admit that. But farming is a very crucial part of the European political conversation. And so you can't just steamroller ahead and just overrule farmers, especially at this very sensitive time when there's this lumpy skin disease that they're dealing with and a whole host of problems. So it's very hard to just go ahead, but at the same time, there is a realization here in this building that if the EU wants to get serious about being a true geopolitical player, then signing Mercosur would send a strong signal in that direction.
Indeed, Armen Georgian there on the gripes, and they are quite extensive ones, of the farmers in France and Italy, which has led to the basic scuppering of the EU-Mercosur deal, delayed its signing until January. But as Armen's pointing out, it's hard to see how the things that farmers are objecting to will be cleared up and clarified in that period. Giorgia Meloni telling Lula da Silva of Brazil that she needs a month to convince Italy's farmers. We're waiting for comment from Emmanuel Macron regarding his vision of how French farmers will react, and we'll begin more as we get it.